much. I'm Paige. I'm an alcoholic. And yeah, where we're going to be diving in is on page 62 and kicking off on the very first paragraph that says selfishness, self-centeredness. And then it's got an exclamation mark. I mean, who could they be talking about? Certainly not moi. Selfish, self-centered? I don't think so. But to give us a chance to find page 62, first full paragraph, it's also important that we talk about, like, what is the context with which we're diving in today. So we're in the right in the middle, the depth of the third step. And what we're describing is why we need to make that third step decision. We need to be convinced. And what do we need to be convinced of is that us living our life our way doesn't work. And what we are trying to see is what's going on beneath the surface. Leaving aside the drink question, although it is helpful to be like, hey, the step one experience, I can't get sober, I can't stay sober. That's why I need a spiritual awakening. That's why I need to make this decision. And the decision is to work these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. But to decide that, all right, I'm going to give these 12 steps my best go as a way of life. I need to be convinced that my life isn't working. And last week we were talking about how we sit in the delusion of the director's chair and we're trying to direct the play and it's not working. And now we're going to continue to have a look at root, at base. What is our problem? So page 62, first paragraph. It's not my fault if you didn't find it yet. I gave plenty of time on a tangent. All right, 62, first paragraph, selfishness, self-centeredness. And then I always like to point out, it's exclaiming. We got an exclamation mark. We got M dashes all over the thing, but we don't have too many exclamation marks. So it is exclaiming selfishness, self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our troubles. And what we're seeing is a little bit of the sort of spiritual jujitsu that I find in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'll be honest, I was utterly convinced my problem was him. You know, the guy I was dating. He's the problem. And if he could just get his stuff together, your girl, she could stay sober, no problem. But then I was convinced, all right, you know what? Alcohol, you know what? You got me. Alcohol's my problem. You're right. But then another spiritual little bit of judo or jujitsu happens and I get flipped on my head and I realize my problem is not alcohol. My problem is the obsession of the mind. The thought that I have that takes me back again and again and again to that first drink, despite the fact that it is ruining my life. And I'm like, okay, I see that. I have evidence of that in my life. And then you're doing it again. You're telling me selfishness, self-centeredness, that is the root of my troubles? Wait, what? And so what does that mean? So selfish, because I find to have descriptions of what the words mean to be really helpful. So for me, selfish is how I act and behave in the world. So selfish is my actions, my behaviors. It's how I act and behave in the world. And self-centered is how I think and perceive. So self-centered is thinking and perception. Now, I'll give you a very practical example. When I stole your car, slept with your husband, and peed on your carpet, that was selfish. When I was worried you didn't like me because I did all those things, that is self-centered. And I would never. It was linoleum. I always like to make that joke. It's a classic. So that's what the difference between selfishness and self-centeredness is. And when it says that we think is the root of our troubles, if you think about like a plant or a tree, the roots are what draws up into the plant. It draws up into the tree. It is the depth of the plant, of the organism. So what it is saying is that the depth of our troubles is selfishness and self-centeredness. And how can that be? Well, you see, as alcoholics, as human beings, to be honest with you, we suffer from something. And what we suffer from is known as the spiritual malady. And it's not limited to alcoholics. It's not limited to people like us. But that spiritual malady is the pain that I experience when I'm sober. You know that pain where it's like I'm so depressed I can't get out of bed? or that anxiety where it feels like somebody is stabbing my shoulder blades, or it feels like I'm a raw, exposed nerve ending, and for some ungodly reason, the wind is blowing. That emptiness, that loneliness that nothing can fill and nothing can satiate. And that is a part of the human condition. But you see, when I am in pain, all I can do is think of my pain. And that's self-centeredness. And when I'm in pain, I act from that place of pain. And that is selfishness. I know you guys are really well coordinated and don't know what it's like to like stub your toe. But you know, when you stub your toe, or I was gonna mention more painful things, and I'm like, I actually better not. I won't mention more painful things. But you know, when you're having pain, and that's all you can think about, the pain that you've got going on, the pain, and you're acting from pain, and you're trying to like hold the pain, and you're gentle with yourself and ginger as you move, like that's what we're talking about. I'm coming from pain. But what's the difference between me and a stubbed toe? Is that my selfishness and self-centeredness, it creates more pain. You see, when I am living in self-centeredness, I can't see past my pain. I thought self-centeredness was me thinking I was so wonderful, and that's never occurred in my life. So I'm like, no, I am not self-centered, but I was sitting around thinking about what a piece of garbage I was. And if you know what it's like to just have a lovely Wednesday evening or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, and just think your way into suicidal ideation, not a cloud in the sky. And I'm like, I don't want to be here anymore. It's too much. Like, that's what I mean when I talk about that self-centered. And that self-centeredness breeds more pain. And I'm thinking, man, they all hate me. They don't like me. I'm a piece of garbage, blah, blah, blah. And I act from that place. And when I act from that place, we'll talk about, I step on the toes of my fellows, and then I get hurt even more. So living from selfishness and living from self-centeredness, that creates more pain. And if what's going on beneath the root of selfishness and self-centeredness is this blockage between me and a power greater than myself, man, like this sense, and it is only a sense of separateness from God. A sense of separateness from this power. And when I say God, I mean higher power, creator, the spirit of the universe, whatever you're the most open to. But when I'm operating from that place of pain and this sense of separateness and this conscious apartness, the selfishness and self-centeredness in their various manifestations block me off from this power. And they create more blockages. And the purpose of the 12 steps is to clear away the stuff inside of me that is blocking me from this power that was always there and is always there. But the problem is I'm blocked. And so it says that we think is the root of our troubles. That's what's blocking us from this power. And the result of that blockage is the obsession of the mind. And I think, this time will be different. And off I go. And it says, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. So that is what is driving me. 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. Now, just like last week, I won't actually ask you guys to do a show of hands because I'm about to do my own little jujitsu thing. So don't feel free to not audience participate. It's all consensual. Hands on the wheel, Brian. 10 and 2 or wherever they're supposed to be. Drive safely. All right. No, I'm just kidding. Do what you want. But it's like when it says driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. Is there anyone here who has ever said, I took my will back. I started driving the bus again. Now, I'm not asking for a show of hands because I am going to do a little, that's lovely of you guys to be like, yeah, I had. Well, I don't want to be like, hey, you're wrong. But what I want to point out is who was driving. You see, I think, yeah, you know what? As it pertains to my alcoholism, we got to get a designated driver because I can't be driving this thing. But when it comes to other areas of my life, 10 and 2, hands on the wheel, let me do it. I know. I drove my life right into a brick wall. And listen, I'll do that sober too. I know I drove my life right into a brick wall, but I can handle running my finances. I can handle running my romantic life. I can handle work, and I think I'm driving the bus. Who's driving? 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. We've got a madman at the wheel. When I take my will back, I'm not taking my will. 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. That's who is driving. We'd have better luck with a Western Screech Owl. You know why? Because they're not night blind. I think my defects are pretty night blind. You know what I'm saying? So that's the reality. I think I'm just going to take my will back a little. It's that. That is what is driving me. And it makes sense when I am led by, when I am driven by these things that I'm not able to make fully well-rounded decisions. I mean, that bus is going off the cliff. It's down a ravine. You know what I mean? It's not good. And then it talks about we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. And when we get to inventory, what we will be really upset by is their retaliation. But it takes the process of the columns for me to see that I stepped first. It goes on to say, sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation. I was out there driving my bus into buildings and stuff, but minding my own business, and I was just an innocent bystander, and all of a sudden they hurt me out of nowhere. And then it says, but we invariably means pretty well always, find that at some time in the past we have made decisions based on self, which later put us in a position to be hurt. And if you're writing in your book, and I have on record that here, that's what the cool kids are doing. No pressure, you're all cool kids. But if you're writing in your book, you can make a little note for resentments, column 4. Because we're going to come back to this statement and turn it into a question and look at, when we get to resentments, where did I make a decision based on self? A selfish, self-centered, self-seeking decision that put me in a position to have this resentment in the first place. And as we talk about driving the bus, one of the things that is helpful to see, a metaphor that I use a lot, is last week when we were talking about the actor trying to be the director. You see, it's this metaphor. And if you have kids, or you've been a kid where there's a bit of an age gap in the siblings, you will know this situation intimately. So the older child gets some sort of video game system, and I won't date any of us. Doesn't matter whether it's an Xbox or a Pong or whatever it was, Atari, whatever. And now I feel like I'm going to get a bunch of things in chat. No, this video game system, how could you not mention the NES or whatever? We are hanging on by a thread. We are just doing our best today. But whatever video game system that comes to mind. And so what happens is the older child starts playing and starts having a lot of fun. And then the younger child, now this only works if there's a significant age difference. The younger child, what do they want? They want a turn. And so what does the older child do? They give him a controller that's not plugged in. Now, I apologize if I've brought up some childhood trauma, wait a minute, my older sibling did this to me. You can tell who's the older and the younger, because, who gets indignant and who's yeah, when I mention this. But you see, in this metaphor, we are the younger sibling. And I'm pushing the buttons on my life, and I'm trying to control the world, and I'm doing things. I'm hitting A, B, I'm going up, down, left, right. The Atari code, that's not quite what it is, but you know what I mean? I'm pushing the buttons, I'm flipping the things, I'm doing it. And it's not quite working. it's not quite responding. And here's what's frustrating is I'm taking action, but I'm not getting the results. And when I come to the third step, what I'm beginning to awaken to is the reality that I am working with a controller that's not plugged in. And I'm going to trust that there is, now I won't say a spiritual older sibling, because some of us have been terrorized by older siblings. And it's like, I don't want a higher power that resembles an older sibling. No, thank you. But like a spiritual older sibling, again, you don't have to live with that metaphor, that has the controller that is plugged in, that knows the rings that Sonic's got to catch, or knows, what the characters are supposed to be doing. And I'm going to let go of the control that I didn't have anyways. I didn't have it anyways. And so it goes on to say, so our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making? What? Our troubles? Basically that can't, no. They arise out of ourselves? And the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot. I sometimes make I've made a couple little band logos, like, welcome to the stage, our next performer, it's self-will run riot, woo! So I've got little self-will run riot things. So it's like, so our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making? No, I can see that for everyone else in the church basement community center Zoom room. I can see that your troubles are basically of your own making, but not me. And when it says they arise, where? Out of ourselves. And the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot. No, you know what? That can't possibly be true. I don't think so. Though he usually doesn't think so. I was priming that the whole time. And because it's just another beautiful example of the book meeting us where we're at and going to take us where we need to go. The book isn't expecting that I'm going to read it and be like, you know what? I am riddled with self. I am riddled with selfishness, self-centeredness. You're right. That's correct. I've got no issues with that. No. It's like, hey, yes, we get that. You wouldn't think so. And then this is an important line. Above everything, so more important than anything else, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. So more important than anything else, I need to be free of selfishness. And it says we must, or it kills us. And that's a pretty heavy warning. But I also will say it's a little musty. Somebody's got to open a window. It's a little musty in here. I thought there were no musts in this thing. Must. I have to get free of selfishness. And how does it kill me? What does that mean? How does that work? You see, I am blocked from the consciousness of the presence of the power that I need to save my life. And if I stay blocked, I'm in that place of darkness. I'm in that place of pain. And the only relief that I have to that pain is that first drink. And I go back to it again and again and again. And so how do I get free? Well, it's going to tell us. It says God makes that possible. So this power is what gets me free. And again, if you're like me, you're like, but how? How does that work? I need it very clearly, very plainly. That is the purpose of 4 through 9. 4 through 9 is what identifies the blockages. I begin to identify them in step 4. I begin to see them a lot more clearly in step 5. I become willing, and then I ask for them to go, and they are taken in 6 and 7. And where I begin to truly get freedom from them is in steps 8 and 9, when I am going out and making amends. And then I continue that process in 10 and 11, and I deepen that connection in 11, and I carry this message to others in 12, and that allows that channel to stay clear. So this is how I get freedom from it. So it says There often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. I can't overcome self with self, and I've tried. If you've ever had, and not you guys would never have a defective character. You guys never would have had one that like a little pesky defect that isn't going away. And like, you're like, man, I'm gonna get rid of it tomorrow. I like to joke about, what I'm going to do. I am absolutely beautiful. Yeah. Second requirement that yes. So I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to really work on my procrastination tomorrow. You know what I mean? I love, and it's like, yeah, you know what? I'm really going to manage and control my road rage. As soon as these idiots get out of my lane, it's often a lot like that. And if you know what it's like to come up against self with self, and I try to exert more self, and it doesn't work. I'm playing with a controller that's not plugged in. So it talks about many of us. So I can't get rid of self with based on self. It's like bone on bone, page on page. There's no option for somebody like me. And it says many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, which is the unit of which moral and philosophical convictions come in. Like if you go to Costco, you can get them in a jumbo size galore. I'm just kidding. But what does it mean to have moral and philosophical convictions galore? What that means is that I have values, I have morals, I have principles. But what we're saying is, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. And that was an idea that we began to awaken to in the last chapter, in the chapter We Agnostics. It spoke about how we had these moral and philosophical convictions, but we could not live up to them. We had these ideals, but you see, the power is not in an ideal. The power is not in a conviction. The power is not in a value. The power is not in a belief. There is no power there. Where is the power? Well, lack of power is my dilemma. That power is in God. Higher power, the creator, the spirit of the universe. And that is what I need. I need that relationship with power. So it goes on to say, or it says, many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore. So we had beliefs, we had values, we had these ideals, but we could not live up to them, even though we would have liked to. Is that my experience? I get to hold that up. My friend, now I'm pretty sure Terry stole it from my friend Babe, so I always give credit. I always do. So we're quoting Babe, where it's like, if this is a book of mirrors, it is not simply a book of mirrors when we're talking about step one. Of course, in the first step, I want to hold my experience up to the light of what this illness is and say, is this me? Do I have this thing? But just as much, I want to hold my experience up to the light of, hey, is this me? Am I convinced of this? That I can't live up to these things that matter so much to me. I can't be the person I needed to be. I can't do it. And it says, neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. This is another example where my power fails. And I talk about the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Well, I talk about them a whole lot. That's pretty much all I do all day. But when I talk about them as a series of surrenders. Now that word, not found in the first 164 pages, but just like the word sponsorship, the description is all over it. And you see, I come to the first step and I begin with the idea that my problem is alcohol, just as I kick this thing off. And then I come to surrender. Okay, you know what? Maybe my real problem is this obsession of the mind, that I can't stay sober on my own power. And I'm willing to give that over. I'm willing to give that problem to something, and that awakens to the second step that there could be a solution. And in the second step, we begin to have a look at that spiritual malady. We look at it on page 52 on the bedevilments. And on page 52 in the bedevilments, I begin to see, really like as a mirror of like, man, I'm sober and I'm miserable. It's an exploration of the spiritual malady. And I look and it's like, can I do anything about that on my own? And it's like leaving aside the drink question. So sober, this is me and I'm not okay. And I can't do anything about it. And I'm willing to give that to a power greater than myself. By the way, I don't know that's what I'm doing. I'm just continuing on with the process. I'm just doing what my sponsor tells me to do, because I'm like, what else? Because I see that I'm in trouble. I don't have an answer. And then we come here on page 62 and we're talking about self and selfishness and self-centeredness and the 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, this self that is blocking me. And I can see that, you know what? I can't overcome self on my own power. And I become willing again to let something else take care of this. And we'll see that, by spoilers, we're going to see that in step 4 with our resentments and with our fears and with our sex conduct. And we're going to see that again and again and again, a series of giving more and more of myself, an outpouring of more and more of myself to the unconditional love that is God. And I don't know, and by the way, spoilers, I do not know if this power is loving. I don't actually, at this point, I don't know if that's true. But we're going to talk, depending on how I do for time, so probably not amazing. We're going to talk about some of the promises. And I talk about this a lot. But anytime I see promises in this book, that's evidence of care. Deeper than that, anytime I use this book as a mirror, and I can see the promises on the page mirrored in my life as the result of the actions that I take, the directions in this book, what happens is that is irrefutable evidence of God's care for somebody like me. So it goes on to say, we had to have God's help. And so this is another surrender, more and more of myself to the unconditional love that is God. And I only know that through doing it. I'm not going to believe me. You know what I mean? I'm going to come to a meeting like this and be like, I don't think so. She's full of it. You know what I mean? I can only know it through experience. And so here it is. It says, this is the how and why of it. Get ready. It says, first of all, we had to quit playing God. So this is what I talk about. We get our spiritual P45s for those in the UK, spiritual pink slips for those in North America. We get fired from the management position of our lives. And responsees, I even make them little spiritual P45s or pink slips. And on it, it says, it's like reason for termination of employment. And it says gross incompetence. See step 1 for further amplification. What I mean by that is in the first step, I conceded that my life was unmanageable. Do you know who was managing my life? Me. And I managed my life into an unmanageable state. Listen, if I managed a Nando's as poorly as I managed my life, I ought to be fired. That Nando's is burnt to the ground. Like it's in embers. Like it's bad, and it's like, I ought to be fired. So that's it. And why am I getting fired from managing my life? Because it didn't work. Is that my experience? And I'll throw something out because this is what my life looked like, is I spent most of it suicidal. And if I want to end my life, it's a good indication that it's not working. Because I'm willing to pull the plug on something that's salvageable. But when I'm in the driver's seat, when I'm not actually driving, 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, that's who's driving. But, when I'm trying to manage my life is the point where it is like I can't live it anymore. And if I feel like that, and I've been there, man, it's a good indication that me doing it my way doesn't work. And why don't I try something that does? And it says, next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the capital P principal, we are his agents. He is the capital F Father, we are his children. And so what are we talking about right here? So somebody has to manage my life. Because, I wasn't doing a good job. And to be fair, nobody managing it would probably be better than me. But we need some sort of manager. And so what we are doing is the book is giving us these metaphors with which we can orientate ourselves. So it says he is the director in response to the metaphor that we spoke about last week. So last week we were talking about, listen, I am tree number 3. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to trust that there is a director, capital D director, that has the full script, that knows the lighting cues, that knows the music, that knows, where all the actors are supposed to be, their lines, all of it. And what I am going to do is I am simply going to follow my lines. And my lines are going to be, my next line is going to be step 4. Followed by 5, followed by 6. You get what I'm saying? Those are my lines. That is how I orientate myself in this way. But human beings, we often learn best through story, through metaphor. That's why myth is so important. And it can be like, okay, well, what do you mean God's going to run my life? What does that look like? And these are some ways in which we can visualize it. And if these don't work for you, that's why there's a bunch of them and you don't have to use them. So the first one that we spoke about is the director, and I'm just going to be the actor. I can't see into the audience, but I'm going to have a level of trust that there is a director. Then it talks about he is the principal and we are his agents. And man, I love to make that joke like, oh, Agent Page. Double O Page, pew pew. What's the Blues Brothers? I'm an agent for God. I'm on a mission for God. You know what I mean? Like pew pew. Double O Page. Where's my Aston Martin? Where's my cool little laser watch? And 007 things. And that is way more fun to look at it. So feel free to look at it in that way. But that's not what it actually means. So the less fun way, but more like technically accurate, not cool, but the more technically accurate way to look at it is an agent is somebody who is legally allowed to act on behalf of a principal. So like a real estate agent is allowed to sell the real estate on behalf of the owner of the property. And so what does that mean? Well, imagine how our life might shift, or the posture of our heart might shift if wherever we go, we perceive ourselves as representatives of a loving higher power. That's going to change how we honk in traffic, that's for sure. You know what I mean? That's going to change how we show up to the grocery store line. But that sort of idea, that I'm working on this agent's behalf, does that not, like, I'm not running the show, but I am working. And then it says, he is the father and we are his children. Now, many of us didn't have healthy relationships with our father. I had no relationship. And so this might not be something that resonates with you. Or it might seem particularly in line with a certain religion that maybe you're not open to, and that's okay. But how I like to approach, he is the father, we are his children, is imagine like the father figure you wanted. And maybe you had a good dad, and maybe that's no problem for you. What is that like to grow up without daddy issues? Tell me more. I can't relate. But that idea of like, what is the father that you wished you could have had? You know, one that was kind and loving and maybe jovial and playful, and that would come and change your spiritual flat tire when you're at the side of the road late at night. Like that sort of orientation. You know, a place of comfort, a place of safety. What about that? Can I move with even if it's not that visual image, can I move with that as a sense or a feeling? And these are different ways. And if none of those resonate with you, that's okay. They don't have to. These are just different options. And it goes on to say, most good ideas are simple. And this concept, this idea, was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we passed to freedom. So in an archway, the keystone is right at the center of an arch. And it is the stone that holds all the tension. I was watching a little thingy about the St. Louis Arch. Why? I don't know. But I was watching a little thingy about how the St. Louis Arch was made, and it's the very top, the very center of the arch, and that's what holds the tension. It was the last one to be placed, and that's that tension that holds it all up. Also, I learned out the it's not wheelchair accessible, and that was a real bummer for me. I was like, oh no, I was having some feelers already. But that's what we're talking about. The keystone is this idea that I am not going to run the show. I am going to let a power that was already in charge anyways be in charge. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this course of action and leave the results in God's hands. That idea that I am not running it, that is what holds the tension of these 12 steps. That I'm not, and like, again, if you're like, but I want to be in charge, we aren't in charge. You know what I mean? Like, it's not plugged in. Listen, if you've ever ordered, I'm going to be a dink. If you've ever ordered something on UPS and you're like, why is it taking so long to deliver? It's almost like the delivery driver keeps zooming into big book studies or something. I'm being a dink and I shouldn't have. You can't make the delivery come any faster. Please drive carefully. I could just see let's not do that. So that idea, like, I'm actually not in charge. I can't control how you think, how you feel, how you behave, what you do. I don't have that power. And so let's go see this arch through which we pass to freedom. And that freedom, that is what is on offer, this new way of life. That freedom is that fourth dimension. That freedom is that spiritual awakening. And of course, we're going to get freedom from the obsession of the mind. But deeper than that, what we're going to be able to begin to experience is freedom from that bondage of self. Begin to experience freedom from the selfishness, self-centeredness. That's where we can get true freedom. So it goes on to say, when we took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. So this has been a whirlwind 2 paragraphs, because I got fired, rightly so. I got a new boss. And now what we're going to do is we're going to have our employment contract. I'm going to get hired. And so when we sincerely took such a position, the position of God is the capital E employer. God, higher power, the creator, the spirit of the universe is the employer. And I'm going to work for this power. I'm the lowercase employee. So when we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer. Being all powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. And that sentence, we had a new employer being all powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. I describe that as being the employment contract, because nothing says happy, joyous, and free like turning spirituality into bureaucracy. I'm just a fun little gal. Oh, just having some fun. But this is the employment contract. And I actually do not think I've had any job where I've actually had to sign an employment contract, which that's a little alarming the more that I think about this. But you know how most of you have upstanding, responsible jobs, and you go and you're hired, you got the job, and they give you an employment contract. And in that employment contract, what does it have? Well, at first, and at first in this contract, what it has is it tells us what our salary is. It tells us, our hourly wages, or maybe our salary, our dental, our eye vision, benefits. Ooh, that's how you know I'm getting up there, is because I'm excited. I'm like, what's the dental coverage? But it's vacation days. I don't know what the Canadian equivalent to a 401k is, so I definitely don't know what the UK equivalent is. But your retirement plans, vacation days, flex hours, work from home stuff, like everything that ping pong table in the break room, all the things that they are given to us. That's what we're going to be paid. And that's what we see right here when it says he provided what we needed. So this power is going to provide everything that I need. which I will point out is different than what I want, which is rude. What I need and what I want are not often the same thing. And I actually have a friend that'll be like, oh girl, didn't know you needed that. Yikes. But when we talk about it, everything that I need will be given to me. So all of my needs will be taken care for. But in an employment contract, what else does it have? Well, it tells me what I'm supposed to do. Like, what are my roles and responsibilities? Like, what are the hours I'm supposed to work? What are my job responsibilities at work? Oh man, they want me to show up every day on time. Come on, that's a little much, a little demanding there, job. But this is what the employment contract is asking of us. It says, if we kept close to him, how do I keep close to God? So yeah, obviously prayer. Yep, obviously meditation. But that is the purpose of the 12 steps. How I keep close to God is these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. That is how I keep close to God. And then it says, and performed his work well. So how do I perform God's work well? Like, what is that? What are you asking of me? What is it that you want me to do? Well, what is God's work for somebody like me? And I think Dr. Bob spoke about it most eloquently when he said love and service. Love and service. Love and service to all God's creatures. All God's homies, because that's the language I use, to show up to life full of love and service. But also, like, I have been made specifically to be of use to God's silly little drunks, or very serious, responsible, adult-sized drunks, in case you're like, don't call me a silly little drunk. I would never. Because I have suffered the way that I have suffered, because I have gone through what I've gone through, I have been specifically created and made to be of service to people like me. And when I live in this way, when I live in this sort of employment contract, it is incredible what happens. Now, what follows is what is known as the third step promises. And what I'm going to do is girl, we are landing the plane real soon. I know, I'm as shocked as you are. We're gonna pick up on the third step promises next week, and we're gonna really go into some detail with them, and we're gonna compare and contrast them. But the third step promises happen not at step 3, not when I sign that employment contract, but when I actually go to work. Because I don't know if you're aware of this, and it is rude that this is the order, but that I have to show up to work and then they pay me? Like, what is that about? I don't just get paid because I signed the employment contract. I know some people are fancy enough they get signing bonuses or whatever, but I've never been that person. So this is what happens when we go to work. And how do we go to work? What does that look like? Well, I haven't actually put in my first day of work until I've picked up the pen and the paper and begun to write inventory. That is what I'm deciding to do. That I'm going to live this way of life. Like my life depends on it, because it does. And yeah, next week we're going to dive into the third step promises, which follow in this paragraph. And then we're going to talk about the third step prayer. And then if I do well for time, which not likely, we'll even get into some step 4. So I'll leave it there and I'll toss it over to Pepper.